As part of my job reviewing televisions on this channel, I've bought hundreds of 4K Blu-rays, sometimes even 2 copies of the same movie, strictly for testing purposes of course, not because the movie is so good. I bought it twice. But there are many older movies which are still not available in 4K HDR either on 4K Blu-ray or on streaming services. So I chose a few 1080p SDR movies I thought would look fantastic in 4K HDR and regraded them in high dynamic range and white color gamut, using an ASUS PA32 UCG monitor that can reach 1800 nits of peak brightness, as well as 86% of Rec 2020 thanks to quantum dot technology from Nanosys. The first SDR movie I graded was Avatar. I just thought that the bioluminescent forest with all the glowing plants was such a perfect candidate for HDR, and I could also push the white color gamut or WCG without having to worry too much about making the skin tones look unnatural. Because I was grading from a 1080p SDR source, the seeds of the sacred tree continued to appear slightly blown out in my HDR grade. I just wished I had access to the original source file to restore more specular highlight detail. Nevertheless, hopefully you can appreciate how much more alive and three-dimensional the HDR grade is compared to the SDR version. I will shut up for now, so that you can enjoy the rest of this HDR footage, together with a soundtrack I specifically chose to complement this segment. Now, I don't know how Mr. Tarantino feels about HDR, but there are so many elements in Kill Bill that would look spectacular in HDR, such as the lights in the Japanese bar, and the reflections of the Hattori Hanzo katana sword. Although again, because I am grading from an SDR base, there's some clipping of highlight detail without any way for me to recover them. In terms of white color gamut, the yellow tracksuit worn by Uma Thurman could certainly be expanded beyond Rec 709 to give a pop that's simply unattainable on a 1080p Blu-ray. The tricky bit during my grading process was making sure her skin tones still looked fairly natural. Let me know what you think of the HDR grade in the YouTube comment section below. Tron Legacy is sort of a guilty pleasure of mine, but it absolutely deserves a 4K Blu-ray release. Just look at all the light cycles, the reflections on the floor of the grid, the neon lights and fireworks. And because of the insanely high contrast generated by the black floor, certain elements seemed to give the illusion of more perceived highlight detail, even though I was grading from the same 1080p SDR source. I mean, I've watched this light cycle battle so many times that I can literally hear Daft Punk's soundtrack now. Unfortunately, I cannot put in the original soundtrack for copyright reasons. So here's a royalty-free substitute for you to listen to. This video is sponsored by Nanosys, the world's leading quantum dot company. So, what do you think of these HDR versions compared to SDR? Let me know in the YouTube comment section below. Remember, I was only using the 1080p SDR versions as my base for performing HDR grading on top, so a true HDR grade from the raw source material should look even better with superior retention of specular highlights and shadow detail. Who knows, if this video is shared widely enough by you guys, it may persuade the directors, the DPs, the studios, the producers to finally release these movies on 4K Blu-ray. Let us just hope the HDR grade won't be as underwhelming as this 4K Blu-ray which I have analyzed some time ago in this video here.